Hi there, my name is Robin, and welcome to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. Today, I actually want to talk about one of the most fascinating books out of the genre in recent memory, and that is Simon Jimenez's The Spear Cuts Through Water. This is a book that actually won the prestigious BFSA Robert Holstock Award, and for me, it's one of the most intricately written fantasy novels in recent years. Um, it's I say intricately written because this is a novel that it uses multiple narration styles. It uses multiple POVs within the same situation. It feels almost like every character in a particular scenario gets some words in the story, which is crazy. It makes for a very dense, a very challenging read, which is not something you can probably get away with doing whilst multitasking. Um, and overall, I don't think you should attempt because you will get very lost very fast. Um, the entire book has a very oriental mythological feel, which is kind of reinforced by one of the narration styles where the story is discussed as if it's a play that's occurring on a stage. Um, it has that feel, it has that sensation to it. So we get a really high mythological sense, and at the same time, we get some very low down in the dirt gritty moments. Because this is a very graphic book. There's abuse. There's so much happening. There's ritual cannibalism. Like there's so much that if someone had told me there's a way to write a novel that's both a love story and a grim dark novel, I wouldn't have believed it until I read this book. But that's kind of what this feels like to me. Um, it's a very complicated tale with a very straightforward plot. It's about two warriors who help to shepherd an escaped goddess across a land in an attempt to save her and to free the land from the reign of a tyrannical emperor and his three sons. Um, Free the land from their abuse and their exploitation. Um, this is a very imaginative novel from start to finish in the world, the characters, in the scenarios, in literally the way that it's written and presented to you as a reader. It's a very complexly written novel. It will punish you if you don't focus on it. Um, well, for most people, I should say, it will punish you if you don't focus on it. I initially started reading this while semi distracted, and I had to stop. I had to restart and read it at times when I could sit and focus and really marinate on every single word, on every single phrase that Simon Jimenez puts to page here. Um, so Simon Jimenez is an amazing writer to even be able to pull off something like this. This is a novel full of some very quotable quotes, some very unique turns of phrase. It's a novel that will stick with you. There's many scenarios, many even sentences that will stick with you as a reader. Um, it's fascinating. It was done in a very fascinating way. Um, it for me, I can see it as being one of those books that there's going to be no middle ground. You either love it, you really enjoyed it, or you couldn't get into it, you dislike it. There's not going to be anyone who's going to say, oh, it was an okay read, whatever. No, none of that. Definitely none of that. Um, and more importantly, I do think that because of the way that this novel is written, the topics it deals with, the story, the manner in which it unfolds. And so I do think that this is a novel that is not going to be very obscure. I do think it's a novel that 10 years from now will be mentioned frequently when people talk about the great novels of fantasy in recent years. One of the things that, being a long time fantasy reader, I notice is when novels come out, there's always a lot of hype, a lot of marketing, a lot of rave reviews. And 5 years down the line, when I'm talking to a friend and I mention some of these novels, it's a complete blank. Hasn't heard of them, has very little interest in them. They just don't they don't withstand the test of time and the evolution of the genre with each year as more writers create more creative novels. I don't think that's going to be a case here. I do think this is a novel that will that will spawn quite a few copycats or attempts at copycats, quite a few people who will release novels where we'll get blurbs. Maybe Game of Thrones meets The Spear Cuts Through Water, that kind of marketing blurb. But there's no one who's going to be able to replicate the level of insanity that this novel achieves in terms of what it says and how it says it. One of the standout things of this novel for me was there's no possibility of you thinking back on the characters and not being able to differentiate them. Everyone is unique, everyone is fascinating, everyone has their own stuff, their own traits that really stick in your mind and stick in ways that you're not going to just treat them all as a seamless blob, as just characters meant to push along the story in some way and not necessarily central to that story. They will stick with you, and not necessarily for good things, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of focus on this novel being a love story, whatever. For me, it is also still very much a grim dark story because of some of the content that it contains. All in all, I feel like this is a book that if you make the investment of the time and the focus on it and it manages to capture you, you're not put off by the narration style and by the content. I feel like this is a novel that will reward you and will reward you richly for for your time and your investment. It's also a complicated one that many people will easily be able to talk about for hours. Like I wrote some notes about this novel as I was going through, and before I made this video I had to start taking out stuff because there's so much I could get into. I try with these videos not to get too deep into it because I don't want to at any point present spoilers or even share too much of what happens in the story. I rather my goal is for you as a viewer to listen to what I have to say about this book and check it out, having a pretty good idea of maybe what to expect without necessarily knowing what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. All in all, for me, I would say this book is worth the read, if only for the experience, if only to see what the hype is about. Will you enjoy it? That's a complete coin toss for me, because in the same breath that I can see many people really getting captivated by this novel, I can also see other people being completely put off by what's written and how it's written. But for me, it was a very fascinating read, a very fascinating experience. It made me immediately go and order Simon Jimenez's only other published book, The Vanished Birds. And you can bet that moving forward, anything he publishes, I will be reading. So yeah, that's my take on The Spear Cuts Through Water. Is this a novel that you've read? What do you guys and ladies think of it? Was it worth the hype? Was it utter garbage, let me know in the comments. And if you've made it to the end of this video, as always, thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see, hopefully you follow me again for the next, whatever next I have to say. Thank you very much.